What's the fastest you've ever quit a job? And why? You/Oful_Shalgomad responded. I showed up for the first day ready to start a sales job. I'd been hired with some stubble, but not yet a full beard the month prior. I thought nothing of it. The beard was neatly kept and short. The hiring manager pulled me aside after the first hour of onboarding right as I started filling out the new hire paperwork. The boss started, "We have a challenge today." Oh, boy. Already with the corporate speak. He told me that this was a clean-shaven outfit, and that I was to please return home and shave. I went home, opened a beer and sat on my porch thinking of my next move. After an hour or so, I got a text asking if I'd be back. I replied by sending a pic of the company's ad in the local paper looking for new representatives. The person in the ad had a beard. I never went back. You/Casino_Night responded. 1.5 days. I was beyond desperate for money and I took a job in telemarketing. I could barely scrape together the gas money to drive there and the bills were piling up. The first day was listening to calls, so L just sat there. The second day I had Mr. Selling King behind me listening to calls as I made them. He kept yelling at me to be pushy and obnoxious when people would be polite and kind when asking me to please never call again. I excused myself to go take a leak and just drove away. I'm happy that I turned things around. I have a job I love and make a decent living with a good company. I needed that low point to motivate me. You/Click to Display responded. The boss of a trucking company was a complete asshole. I was a teenager and supposed to be an assistant around the shop. He had me doing ridiculous shit, like cleaning his personal pickup truck and scrubbing the disgusting bathroom with paper towels. All the while he called me a dumb Polak constantly, even though I'm not Polish. What sealed the deal is when in his office he told me to be grateful for the opportunity and that he could have me sucking his dick. I left immediately after at lunchtime about 3 hours through the day. I had to go back to grab my check the next day and he has the nerve to say, "What's the matter? So you don't like working for me?" I'm not that bad, people have it worse. I didn't even answer, just grabbed the check and left. I later heard he got sued by a lady in finance and lost the company. You/Tuna Killimac responded. About 3 hours into my first shift. When I started college I went around applying. I interviewed at one store and it went well. The manager asked what my class schedule was like and what hours I could do, and my availability was a perfect fit. My first day, after a couple hours, he gave us an updated schedule because I guess he'd fired someone, and he had me scheduled during my class times. I told him that wasn't going to work and he gave some spiel about how in the real world a job comes first. He actually expected me to just stop going to class so I could cover the shifts that he'd caused to be unfilled. I said there's no way to change the schedule, he said no, and I went back to the break room and took off my store shirt, tossed it on a table, and left. You/Boxless responded. Best Buy, before shift even began. Got back from a summer away. Got hired at a local Best Buy. They asked when I could start, told them any day except the coming Tuesday as I had a pre-existing ticketed event which they already said was no issue in the interview. Next day get emailed schedule, a single shift. On the one Tuesday evening I was assured I'd be off. Planned to call after class, but as I walked out my phone rang. My old boss from a few years ago at a GameStop offered me my old job so he wouldn't have to train someone because he was lazy. Told him I could start Wednesday, he agreed. I called Best Buy and told them to suck a dick. I remember the manager saying, "Don't be so rash. Do you really want to burn this bridge?" I said, "Yes," and hung up. You/Aging Lemon responded. 2 hours. Got a job in a startup bio research lab after college because I had a lot of training and experience in certain equipment and procedures. Within an hour, saw the boss publicly humiliate someone else for reporting that they messed up a particular run. Really not a big deal, maybe an hour gone and $10 worth of reagents at the time. You really don't want people hiding oopses from you in research studies with many and complex procedures protocols. Then I saw that we were fast running out of a desiccating, drying, agent and that would have to slow down or stop until more came. Boss said nah, just reuse it. Tried to object but he jammed his finger into my chest and told me that as the FNG he owned my ass. I said okay and quit. That was nearly 20 years ago. I ended IP tutoring college kids to save up for grad school. You/Queasy Contract 3081 responded. Not me, but my old master sergeant from the Marines. He retired as a master sergeant who used to be a recon sniper, then instructor for a million different weapons. His first job was at a shooting range. They stuck him behind the register the first day. He said I have 23 years of instruction experience, put me on the range, so they did. The first thing he witnessed was an elderly lady in her 50s shooting a .44 mag. She's holding it improperly, and it looks like she is struggling in every facet. She was shooting it because her husband got a new job where he isn't home as often. They live in a rough area, and he wants her to learn how to shoot it. He walks up to her and starts to give her instruction on how to shoot it more effectively and safely. The other instructors walk up to him, pull him to the side, and tell him that if she wants instruction, she has to pay for it. He freaks and yells, "So you're gonna let her be a potential hazard to herself and others on the range because you want money? And quit on the spot." Trinker responded. 4 hours. I got a job at a propane bottling facility. I had painting experience, so they told me I was going to be working in the paint shop. The room has a hole in one wall where the empty, used tanks are coming through, suspended by hooks on this automatic rail system. They go past where I'm standing, through a paint booth, and then out through a hole on the other wall that leads straight to a kiln to bake the paint on. I'm supposed to put plastic baggies on the tank nozzles so they don't get painted, and also remove the tanks from the line if they have too much corrosion. The tanks are going by at like hundreds per minute, and the room is broiling since there is a hole that leads directly to the kiln. Break time comes and the line stops. I go to leave and the guy instructing me is like, "No, break time is the only time the line stops, and it's the only time we get to clean the paint nozzles." After talking to the guy some more, he's telling me about all the bladder infections he's had because he never get a chance to use the bathroom. At lunchtime I went to my car and took off, never even went back for my paycheck. PSH42 Wallaby Wasted responded. Full-time job as a crew member at a new fast food franchise. The owner must have had some emotional issues because I had just started my shift at the drive-thru and was grabbing a few pastries for a customer when the owner came around the corner yelling at the top of her lungs at me in front of an entire store of customers and employees to tell me I should have restocked the front display. "Bro, I started 3 minutes ago and it's packed in there, chill." In that moment I handed her my name tag and said I quit. She yelled, "So what? You're just going to quit on me?" "I wasn't yelling at you." And that was before I said anything about her yelling at anyone. I said, "Yeah, you kinda were," and 3 people quit the next day. It was toxic to say the least. Gregelbowski74 responded. Half a shift as a temp. A warehouse packing Christmas food hampers. I was feeding the packing line, and had been given no instruction on how to call for more products. I guess I was just expected to know what to do. So when my pallet of crap ran out, the packing line stopped. Some jumped up team leader came striding over, calling me all the names under the sun because I'd caused the line to stop. I tried to explain I hadn't been told how to call for more products. He called me an asshole, and said something along the lines of, "You don't get your shit together, you'll never work here again." I said, "Well, if that means I don't have to work with an asshole like you, then that suits me fine." I gave him my coveralls, and walked out. Fucking douchebag. Greedy time 3736 responded. I quit what was a pretty simple warehouse job because there was no training. I had to keep racks stocked for people packing boxes. Cool. Easy. Where do I get the stuff from? No one would show me. So these packers are on the other side banging the racks with their fucking sticks to let me know they need protein powder, but there's no one to tell me where I can find protein powder. It was frustrating, and it wasn't the job I was hired to do. My friend and I both were hired for a different job there, but it turns out there was only one opening. I left at lunch on the first day. Deleted responded. 14 hours before my job actually began. So I was working with the Army in border control, and the procedure was that you can go for a couple of months with one unit, which will go home, and another takes over the station. You could also decide to stay for a second rotation with the new command. I had built up a really good and professional work with my commanding officers by then, which worked perfectly for everyone involved. Work was done, all polite, no yelling or rank pulling. 24 hours before the rotation, the new commander, let's call him Captain Asswipe, storms in and starts swinging his dick around. I was up for about 30 plus hours then with all the logistics of change of command, so L wasn't exactly in a great mood. He proceeds to order me around and just being a prick for the sake of it, nagging on tiny details, telling me that the next months won't be pleasant for me. So I look him in the eye and tell him that I really don't think so, as I withdraw my request for the second rotation immediately. Good luck finding someone else on such a short notice. On top of that, a close friend did the same thing, so they were now missing 2 valuable assets within hours just because of one asshole. He started yelling that I can't and that they will sue me, yada yada. Packed my bag and left. Never heard from him again. Lost a bit of good money but got paid in Captain Asswipe's stupid face as we rolled out the building. Good times, would do it again. My grandma climbs V6 responded. In college I had an opportunity to work at the local movie theater in a rural college town. The owner, Frances, was known to be a gruff and rude woman. I began training concessions at the movie theater after being hired on, and it was pretty mundane. During that time, I was simultaneously offered a job as barista at a local coffee shop. The manager-chef of the cafe was also named Francis. While speaking to Chef Francis, I mentioned that I was already training at the movie theater. Being a small town where everyone knows everyone, Chef Francis proceeds to say to me, "If you're going to work for a bitch named Francis, you might as well work for me." Not only was that statement hilarious to me, I liked her vibe, plus tips were better, so Elle immediately quit during my next training day at the movie theater and started working at the coffee shop. Nope-de-dope-ty responded. Interviewed with a long-haul company, was told I would be home every weekend as my routes were to neighboring states. Got an offer, took a drug test, went to training and signed the new hire paperwork. Got told to show up the next day to begin our first team drive as I was now officially an employee. I asked why we didn't discuss home time schedules in training and the guy asked what I was expecting. He laughed when I told him what the interviewer told me and said I'd be lucky to be 1 day out of every 3 to 6 weeks because we have multiple stops all over the country, return to base and immediately head out again. So I told him, and every other member of management in the room, that they fucking lied to me, and if they lied about that, what else are they lying about? Get your shit in order, shred my paperwork and never expect to hear from me again. There were also other new hires in the room that overheard it all and started looking at management with wide eyes as I walked out. Omba responded. I quit working at a Sunoco after my first shift. I thought I would just be working behind the counter and stocking the inside, but the place was attached to a propane company, so they also wanted me to fill people's propane tanks. I have Raynaud's syndrome and live in Michigan, so constantly moving from inside to outside in the winter is a no-go for me because I get really bad blisters with rapid temperature changes, and the job would have required me to do just that. At the end of the shift I told the manager about Raynaud's and how I'm not the right fit for this, and to update the job description. Blitzer 1069 responded. 2 days. Job felt like a beta switch. Everyone kept giving me different answers for the same question. Everyone I met there looked unhappy and didn't care to greet me. Coworker was consistently work really long hours and doing things beyond his job description. That was a foreshadow to being me one day. A day's work was supposed to be 6-8 hours, ended up being 14 hours and nothing was behind schedule, so that told me this is normal. Edit. A few more details. The employee handbook seemed really strict about work times and using the computers for anything besides work, and how it's considered stealing from the company was another red flag. Also, oddly enough, rule about talking bad about the company too. The more I talked to the boss, the more things he kept piling onto me to do, and this was before I even started working. Then after I quit I actually found some former employee reviews on the site I originally applied, and a lot of fears red flags I had of the company were almost all completely true when I read the negative reviews. Pupidupdipants responded. Dishwasher, and I quit at the end of my first shift. I was straight up with the owner, asked for my money and said I wouldn't be coming back because I didn't like the work. He told me that payday wasn't until next week. I asked for $40 cash and he obliged. Even gave me a bowl of risotto too. He was a good guy, but I just didn't want to be a dishwasher. Fast forward a few years and a couple of my buddies got serving jobs at the same restaurant. They all had nothing but good things to say about the owner. Fidget Spinster responded. Worked at Pizza Hell, let's call it. My boss kept joints and wine bottles in her office and would go off to get high all the time. I can live with that at a food service job, TBH. But on my second day, after the girl training me left for 2 hours to get drunk with my other coworker because she learned that her dad was arrested again or something, I asked my manager how to select a pizza with light sauce. She was so pissed and pointed at the easy sauce button and was all sassy. See the easy sauce button? I said I'm sorry, I didn't know. She goes, you know everything else, how come you don't know this? I'm like, still appalled by that. I was the only sober person in that place and according to her was a very quick learner, and she got mad at me for not knowing one thing. I quit the job over email within 2 weeks of being hired after I had a panic attack over going back in and missing fireworks on July 4th. The location was later closed and I'm pretty sure she was out of a job after that. Complex Package 117 responded. A week. If that. Spoke to management and higher ups in company. I was promised the head technician posting but was assigned to sales until we could fill the sales positions for back to school. PC shop. Students were walking out due to lack of any sort of cohesion. Scheduling, management and training were all terrible. I am not a salesman, I fucking hate it. I've been building custom systems and repairing GPU motherboards since the late 90s. After the 6th day there were only 2 part-time with me, at a post I had no interest in being. Manager came up and wanted me to pick up the slack since we lost a few. I had a word with him on my supposed break time. At which point he wanted me to go back into the store as there was a huge influx of customers. Again, fucking hate sales. I build repair. Answering the phone and standing there at a cash was not what I agreed to. So I left. /Flash Capulet responded. I did 3 weeks at both Macy's and Fresh Direct. I was part-time at Macy's and they offered me more hours after a few weeks, but my section was full of grown men that acted like teen girls, didn't feel like dealing with that for 32+ hours and especially at minute wage. Fresh Direct paired me with a driver-helper duo that left me out in the cold for 2 hours while they completed the rest of the route. It just so happened to be the coldest night of the year at the time. Not ideal. I turned my stuff in the next morning. IDK if they thought it was going to take me 2 hours to complete my stops or if they thought it was going to take them less time to do theirs, but it didn't really matter, that was bullshit. There's definitely been times I wanted to duck out sooner but I decided to stick it out, and outside of Macy's FD, it worked out. /Hamster Technical 449 responded. I was 16 years old. My buddy's mother got me a job at a diner just washing dishes on the weekends. My first day of showing up to work everyone at the restaurant had quit and no one told me they were going to quit, so I show up, I'm there to wash dishes, I'm making coffee, I'm pouring coffee, I'm mopping floors, I'm doing dishes, and all of a sudden the woman who owns the restaurant comes out and she told me that the dishpans were messed up and stacked up and I needed to get off my ass, and I said, well, if you get out of that office and help me a little bit we'll get this stuff caught up, and I turned my back to her and went back to washing dishes and she hit me in the back with a mop. When I turned around and looked at her she had this crazy look in her face and she pulled the mop back again and was swinging it toward my head chest area. Well, I was 16L, kind of grabbed it, snatched it from her, threw it on the ground, took my apron off and threw it on the ground. I go home. My mother asked me, what are you doing? I said, well, I quit. She said, why? I said, well, that woman hit me with a mop. My mother didn't believe me until I was in my 30s and told her the story again. She finally believed me. 2 days. /JEL99 responded. 3 days. I was hired by a marketing company to go door to door to schedule window consultations. I wasn't about to walk all day in a dress shirt and pants in 80 degrees weather, or through the snow during winter. They changed their name years later and tried to get me to interview again. The fastest I was fired from a job was 4 days. The woman I was replacing kept making mistakes while trying to teach me how they used Google Tag Manager. This was seen as my fault. I have anxiety and panic attacks, so Elle asked to go outside to mitigate a panic attack. They said no. I went outside anyways. When I came back in they fired me for insubordination. I dodged a bullet there. /MPD 1987 responded. Worked at a daycare while I was studying for my education degree. On my first day, one of the employees slapped a special needs child in the mouth, right in front of me. I went to the owners of the daycare and they straight up dismissed it and told me to think about whether or not this job is right for me. I walked out right then and there, called the corporate office and reported them, and still to this day I tell anyone who will listen, not to send their children to that school, and why they were also doing other stuff to the kids, shoving their heads down at the lunch table, stealing jewelry from little girls, and much more. That was just on my first day. /Rabbit01131110 responded. I got this job as a document translator, they said. The first day there they asked me to just sit at a desk and nobody told me to do shit for a whole fucking day. I asked one supervisor what I can do for that day and she just goes, oh well, just go read our catalog and put some data in the computer. She didn't even guide me, nobody there did. There's no any translation related work. I was just sitting there at a creepily quiet office with bunch of weird ass boring people and also being ignored, and even wasn't allowed to touch my phone for those stupid 8 hours. I went home, had a mental breakdown thinking about how I got tricked into that job. I quitted the very next day, and when I went back there again to get my paycheck for the 8 hours, one of the supervisors literally threw shades at me cause I was only there for 1 day. /the_Tucko_life responded. I quit 6 months after starting my dream job at an awesome locally based national company, corporate. Boomer director level exec was using the building's internal camera system to stalk female employees, save and share the video with other staff members, and occasionally blackmail them, plus dictating who they could and could not talk to while on the job. I found out I was one of those employees when several videos of me bending over were shared with his team leads. One of them was kind enough to let me know, and I am forever grateful to him. I quit, But not until after I reported the issue to people over his boss's head and threatened to go to the local news. HR was forced to fire him. Several of the other women were in fact not women, but minors under 18, and they tried to build a case against me almost immediately for reporting it to those above his head. They didn't even try to hide it. I quit and am still dealing with the trauma associated with being sexualized and stalked at work. Fun. Don't move to Idaho, kids. TIDR, sexual harassment is still a huge problem in the workforce. U/HA_HO_ responded. Technically before I started working on my own. In college I got a job working the front desk at 3 different dorms, rotating each building, depending on the schedule. I trained for 2 weeks at the end of the first semester and was planning on starting the actual job after winter break. At the start of every semester, the university had a draft to determine what our schedules were. So, the longest tenured employees get first pick and the newest get last pick, and then I believe it snaked back as to not screw over someone too bad. However, I was out of town and unable to attend this draft. Apparently, they just gave me the leftover shifts that no one wanted. I came back after winter break and was told my schedule would be the 5:30 a.m. shift every Saturday and Sunday morning. I sent an email the next day saying I quit. I was a 20-year-old college kid and was not about to put myself through that. U/is Jamal Cumming responded. It's finally my time to shine. So, I go to orientation for a call center job, say at 9 a.m. on a Friday. We did a tour, which was very unintentionally ominous, because the call center was connected by swinging double doors to a, very recently, closed warehouse for the same business. Anyway, around 10:30, I get a call from a recruiter at another employer that I had been applying with for a while, offering the position with a start date of the Monday after next. The position was paying more opportunities for growth, full benefits, weekends off, dream job for an early 20-something who was unemployed due to burnout from retail management. The call center was providing lunch that day, so I got lunch, ate, bonded with my call center co-workers, and afterward I found the HR manager and told her I got another job and was home by 12:30-ish. Bonus, there was no stop sign or streetlights between the call center and my apartment complex, so it was a short ride home. Another kinda messed up bonus, that call center was closed by June of the same year. Hate that for those who were in my orientation class. U/Return of the Gempire responded. 2.5 days. I picked up a seasonal part-time job in a kitchen I had worked in previously. I was hired in as a prep cook, but I had done everything there before. That afternoon the dish pit was still full from breakfast and the dishwasher never showed. There was little prep to do, so I went in and started cleaning. It took about an hour to catch up, but just when I was getting the last bus tubs emptied, chef came in and started yelling at me about the walls and counter being dirty. I'm standing there in disbelief over what I am hearing from him because he knows I don't take shit like that. Little guy was still going off and I took off my apron and hung it up, said sorry, but I'm done, and walked off down the hall. He followed after me, still chugging out vitriol. I was about to clock out at the thumb scanner, which never worked the first attempt, and he said something about my mom. Well, that was my limit. I turned around, took 2 steps towards him, and told him if he said another thing about my mom he'd spend the night in the trash compactor. Then I scanned out, only time it worked immediately, smiled, and walked away. Later that season I moved to a new apartment and he was my neighbor. He came outside during a cigarette one night and he apologized to me, but I sure never tried to do him a favor again. U/Beyond Spression responded. I walked into a job, day 1, for a pet kennel company, aka a pet hotel, and the first thing I saw was a bunch of kennels were full of shit and piss, dogs still in them. I asked the owner and she told me they clean them out after lunch and again around 5. Not ASAP, not as soon as they spotted it. Twice a day. I asked a girl in the grooming bay if that was normal and she replied yeah, but the dogs go out twice a day for 15 minutes. I walked out the back door, went to my car, and called animal control. Gave them my statement and never looked back. I looked up the business about a year later and it was closed. Fuck them. Edit. Autocorrect was actually wrong. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Leave your own stories down below, I would love to read them. If you would like to see more videos like this, please like and subscribe, it helps me out greatly.